Is great filler creating bad pacing? This is the question Bleach fans should be asking themselves with all of the 1000-year Blood War filler. It seemed perfect in parts 1 and 2, but now it seems like this is being done at the cost of good pacing. We're getting extended backstories and brand new content, but some fights feel too short and there have been some really confusing changes. So the question we should be asking is whether all of this great filler is actually hurting this adaptation. In this video, I'd like to answer that question by examining how filler has been used in parts 1, 2, and 3, discussing some of the weird changes to the source material, and explaining what it is that still makes this anime the perfect adaptation. Just be warned that there may be some small spoilers. Now, first things first, we need to make sure we're clear on just how much filler is being added. Also, before I say anything else, I should point out that Kubo has been involved with a lot of this stuff, at least on a supervising level, meaning he has at least approved almost all of this stuff. So when I use the term filler, all I mean is that it's something that was not originally in the source material. By no means am I implying that it's somehow not canon. But like I was saying, if you somehow think that filler is a tiny part of this anime, then you are clearly mistaken, because Pierrot has been adding additional content ever since the early episodes of Part 1. One of the earliest examples I can remember are the scenes with Uryu when he's researching the Quincy's. In the manga, he's not really present at all in the beginning of the arc. But in the anime, they show Uryu using his father's library and researching the enemy while Ichigo is in Hueco Mundo. Of course, there's also the addition of the original Gote 13, which was accompanied by this brand new drawing from Kubo. As a result, we got a glimpse of the original Gote 13 absolutely destroying the Quincy's back 1000 years ago. These are scenes that were originally not part of the story that only build on and enhance the source material, like objectively good for the manga. I believe there's some other examples as well, like I'm pretty sure they fleshed out the last few episodes revolving Ichigo's background, but I can't remember for sure. What I can say is that they killed it when they adapted Ichigo getting his new Bankai. That was absolutely amazing, and it's something you have to watch even if you're not big on the anime. Of course, some people might say the manga is still better and the anime scene is just okay, but we'll talk more about that later in the video. It is worth noting that we do start to see some issues in part 2. Actually, before I say more on that, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. Now, part 2 also has some great filler. For example, we get Shinji's Bankai in the anime for the first time. If it wasn't for this scene, we would never have actually seen his Bankai animated, and it's only referenced in one of the light novels. Now, for part 2, I'm a bit foggy, so thankfully I found this post credited to Reddit user Kaladinkai09. Starting with item 11, we have the Shinji stuff I mentioned, extended fight for Mask, extended fight for Rukia, Mayuri and Shunsui getting new scenes almost every episode, extra dialogue from Ichigo regarding Uryu, a fully adapted Byakuya fight, extra lore for the history between Yuhawak and Ichibei, and extended fights between the Schutzstaffel and Squad Zero, which includes Senju Maru's Bankai. So clearly Pierrot added a bunch of stuff in part 2, and for the most part people really enjoy it. But part 2 is also where we run into some problems, mainly issues of pacing. Now, when I watched part 1, I thought it was paced perfectly. Part 2 has a lot more action, but it also feels like the pacing is kind of off. Like at some points it feels like it drags on, and at other times it feels like it's kind of rushed. Personally, I think the pacing is fine until about episode 6 or 7, and from there it feels like it drags on. Like, it is great that we got extended fights towards the end of part 2. In fact, I think most Bleach fans will argue that these were necessary. But at the same time, this part takes up close to a third of the second core. So looking back, we may come to realize that this maybe was a bit too long. Again, I have no idea, but all I know is that the pacing in part 2 just feels off. I can't say I'd take anything out, but I also feel like it could have been organized a bit better. And this problem only gets worse in Part 3. Part 3 is a really weird case because it has some honestly confusing changes. For example, we get a new fight between Ichigo and Uryu, which in my opinion doesn't really add anything. Like, the two characters clash and it does look cool, but the dialogue is just Uryu being like, I'm a Quincy, and Ichigo being like, Uryu! There's also another Uryu fight where Uryu fights Renji this time. I actually like this one a lot better. It's timed well and it does a lot to build up both characters, not considering whichever character you were rooting for. But one clear example of Pierrot focusing too much on filler is the episode about Ukitake. This is easily one of the most beautiful episodes in Bleach, as it takes what was a very small flashback and turns it into a fully fleshed out backstory that takes up most of the episode. Unfortunately, this is done at the expense of Aizen. This is the same episode where Shunsui releases Aizen, and while they don't cut anything, when compared to the Ukitake stuff, it clearly feels like they should have done this scene a little more justice. And then there's the changes that are just plain confusing, like the Vizards entering the main story later than in the manga. For what reason, I have no idea. This also means that this exchange with Nanao and Lisa gets pushed back and takes place at a different time than in the manga. Again, not a bad change, but it was one where I thought they had cut it up until this point, and I had to do a double take at least a couple of 3 times. And then there's changes like a quote from Yu Hawak being cut from the anime, which isn't devastating, but it does add to his role as the villain. And there's also the fact that they've moved around a lot of other stuff, like how they've changed the order of the fights of Mayuri and Shunsui, even though they were originally back-to-back in the manga. So this brings us back to our original question. Pierrot has done a ton to build on the manga, and has objectively enhanced the source material by adding brand new content that fans wanted to see animated. That being said, it also seems like this is being done at the expense of the pacing, as Pierrot has made some questionable choices when it comes to how they organized the sequencing of each episode, and especially when it seems like there's only going to be about 25 chapters left for Part 4, it really does make you wonder if this filler could have been handled in a better way. Now, does this mean that Thousand Year Blood War is a bad adaptation of the manga? Absolutely not. And to explain why I think that is, it's only fair that we look at what kind of expectations you should have whenever a manga is adapted into an anime. Now, in a perfect world, the anime would actually be better than the manga, because not only would everything be animated, but they would do everything just like you see it in the manga, and they would fill in all the gaps as well. But that's when you're being idealistic, because unfortunately, that's just not what anime studios are going for. At the end of the day, all they're trying to do is show the manga in an animated format. If it turns out that they have a strong passion for the manga, and they do things like add little filler moments here and there, then that is icing on the cake. But it is by no means a reasonable expectation. It's like saying, unless you go above and beyond, you're not doing a good job. So in the context of Bleach, am I saying Bleach fans should have zero expectations and get on their knees and thank God for just every little crumb of anime content? No. But do I think it's reasonable to expect Studio Pierrot to adapt the manga bar for bar, while also trying to adapt it in such a way that it makes up for the slightly rushed pacing of the manga, while also trying to add all of this new stuff? Also, no. What you have to remember is that, whether we like to admit it or not, Kubo had all of these ideas for the final arc, and it just didn't turn out exactly how he wanted it to. It's a great arc, arguably the best in Bleach, but certainly not perfectly executed. The stuff with Squad Zero alone is proof of that. So Studio Pierrot had the unique task of reorganizing the manga in such a way that it had better pacing and was generally more entertaining to watch, while also filling in the gaps left by the source material. And as far as early December when I'm recording this video, I would say they've done a great job of that. My biggest issue with the anime is the pacing. I think it's great in part 1. Part 2 is kind of touch and go, with it mostly dragging on in the later episodes. Part 3 is still a bit early to say, but it throws a ton of curveballs and they make the most dramatic changes. And part 4 has me slightly concerned considering they should have 25 chapters and 13 episodes left. That being said, all I expected for this anime was that they animate all of the cool characters and cool fights and they do it well. And for 3 cores, they've done exactly that. They did an awesome job in the beginning of part 1. Like, they actually made me care about Gilge. They killed it with Ichigo's backstory in his new Bankai. The fights toward the end do drag on a bit, but I think we can all agree that Studio Pierrot did a great job fleshing them out. And while I think part 3's pacing is all over the place, I think scenes like Ukitake's backstory and Shunsui's Bankai are some of the best looking scenes in all of Bleach. So sure, I'm not a fan of the pacing, and I do think it should have been handled differently. But I also think Pierrot has made the perfect adaptation in the sense that they animated all the cool fights to look amazing, and they added a bunch of stuff that they knew people wanted to see. Keep in mind that the manga is still there. If you feel like the manga is the better version, then that's fine. And that's kind of the point. Nobody watches the anime expecting it to be better than the manga. The manga is the manga, but the anime is a chance to watch everything live and feel it experienced in a way that you just can't get with the manga. That is exactly what Pierrot has done. They've taken the source material and animated it in such a way that fans can finally be happy after 7 long years. It's for that reason that while it does have its issues, all of this filler has made this anime perfect. But now I'd like to hear what you think. How would you describe the changes in Bleach? What changes would you make? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like to join me for another discussion like this one, then make sure to check out my live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. In those live streams, I react to new chapters, as well as discuss other anime and manga topics. Also, check out my other Bleach videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.